This is the Vice Commissioner Tim Wilms ruling over the trade that occurred yesterday in the afternoon, approximately 4 p.m. on December 20th, 2017, involving the Commissioner of the League, Ryan Friedel, trading Chris Hogan and a fourth-round pick for next year's draft with Ian Bentley's Alvin Kamara in the intent to use, or with the intent rather, to use Alvin Kamara against Nick Gerbis in Week 16 of the Fantasy Football Championship. It is notable, I will mention before we get started with this decision, with this ruling, that it is notable to mention that the commissioner nearly vetoed a trade with Ian Bentley earlier in the season, where Ian would then receive Alvin Kamara, who was then considered to be a, quote, trash player by the commissioner, saying, and the commissioner here citing that trading with Ian is like, quote, highway robbery, end quote. Sorry about that, Ian. That's what his words, not mine. That actually cannot be considered here as a reason to vote or to veto or to accept this trade. It's just something I wanted to throw out as a potential double standard of the commissioner. I will also say that this ruling is not meant to condemn trades in the league or, promote trades in the league. We have had more trading in the league this year than in previous years, and I do believe that to be a good thing. I wanted to make that known before we get started. I will also mention that I will not speak to any further implications of this ruling in this video, only the ruling and the reasons for that ruling. So the first item here, the commissioner says that it is important to remember that we are all consenting adults and we all consent to the trades consented upon. But it is a valid point. However, there is reasonable belief that the owner of Alvin Kamara, here Ian Bentley, did not consider his long-term value when making the trade, or consider much about the value of Alvin Kamara compared to Chris Hogan. This is backed up by the conversation that the Commissioner Ryan Friedel showed yesterday at dinner to Tim Garreau, and if needed, I will request that as an exhibit as part of this ruling. I will also mention that on principle, this trade is not fair or within the spirit of towards the league for the legitimacy of this championship. That is to say that we do not want an asterisk to always be placed with the 2017 championships as we look back on the league in coming up years. If this trade was made before the playoffs and approved by the league, so let's say in Week 8, this trade is made, it's approved by Ian, and there is an overall consensus that this is an okay trade, that would give opponents in the playoffs down the road of Ryan Friedel, his opponents, that would give them the time to prepare for Kamara and adjust to Ryan's roster. A last-minute addition performed by the commissioner to preserve a spot at a championship, again, is not in the spirit of what our fantasy football league is currently about, nor what it should be about moving forward. As far as the trade itself, Kamara is a first-round value for next year. That's something that universally could be understood and accepted by not just our league, but by leagues all over the country, the world. And that first-round value can conceivably be said that would continue in years to come. Again, this is coming on December 21st of 2017, and we can only assume Kamara's value as of today and not in the coming years. The trade agreement in itself, I would say, is flawed, and the outcome of the trade is one-sided. The commissioner is loading up on his roster for this year, and then will easily earn his fourth-round pick back by keeping Kamara in the 14th round, since he was drafted in the 14th round of this year. The asterisk here is that while the commissioner might choose not to keep Kamara for this upcoming year, trading for Kamara confirms that he has the opportunity to keep Kamara in this year and in following years. So here I will say that the value of Kamara as a keeper, not just for this year, but for next year and then in the years to come, is a top consideration for this ruling. I will mention that. Going further, the commissioner did not consider the league's best interest with this trade. Now, certainly, the short-sightedness, nobody can blame him on. It's not a big issue in itself. The goal of fantasy football is to win, and although the commissioner looks out for the integrity of the league and for the league as a whole, he is also, first and foremost, a player in that league, and therefore wants to win said fantasy football league. However, the circumstances of this trade do make it a very reckless trade. As I mentioned, Week 16 is a very different circumstance, especially a few days before Week 16 begins, than it would be for a regular season trade. The appearance of this deal was that it was done behind closed doors with an intent to perhaps get one over on the commissioner's opponent in Week 16. Again, this is fine in principle, right? The intent or the goal of fantasy football is to win, right? However, the commissioner knew that this would affect not only his championship opportunities in 2017, but it would also affect the league for potentially years to come. And that's something we'll speak on here in just a moment. Further, to go along with this point, the natural outcome of a last-minute backdoor deal that would clearly favor one team over the other, i.e. this deal that was made between Ryan and Ian, made yesterday, it does have dangerous implications for this league. We do need to draw the line somewhere with trades that we believe will negatively affect the league, and this certainly would be one of those. First, this kind of trade right before a big game could lead to tampering and collusion in the future. The public outcry of the league is one piece of evidence that this was clearly not a fair trade and that there was something that didn't smell quite right about this type of trade as well. While Ian most likely did not mean to collude with the commissioner to work against Nick Gerbis, this type of trade might encourage collusion in the future. So again, not putting any onus necessarily on Ian or even the commissioner for this trade, but it does smell like collusion in some capacity, and therefore we should discourage it so that collusion does not occur in the years to come. Similarly, loaner trades, i.e. An owner receiving a player for 1 week, 2 weeks, for a limited amount of time as part of the main principle of that agreement, are not inherently wrong when the trade is conducted between two parties, but it can lead to a moral compromise when taking the whole league into consideration. One of the biggest, and which is why I saved this as the last point that I wanted to make, is, yesterday in the group meet we were talking a lot about the issue of league imbalance. And so when we're looking at league imbalance, I think this trade affects the league, not just for this year, but also for next year and potentially in years to come as well. So I just want to say, to affect the championship this year is wrong, right? In the way that this was done. That's something that I think I've spoken about a little bit earlier. But I will say, too, it has limited consequences, right? So it's just between Ryan and Gerbis, but it is still wrong, right? I'm against affecting the championship this year, as I believe this type of trade, this type of deal, these type of circumstances does delegitimize the champion of the 2017 league. And again, we don't want any asterisks for the 2017 year. However, the bigger issue does come into play for next year. Ian using Kamara as a keeper next year arguably has positive implications for the league if he keeps Kamara, making the league more equitable. The commissioner, on the other hand, to his own admittance, has been at the top of the league for many years running, and I assert that this trade would do nothing but strengthen his stranglehold on some of the top spots in the league that he has already earned over the last few years, but this would only intensify that league imbalance that's been happening over the last few years. And finally, I have to add that the commissioner will defend this trade by citing the letter of the law. Right? That's something that we talked about yesterday. And using very technical language, I will add, that's how he was defending this law. So by the letter of the law, he has some points about how this is something that could potentially happen, right? Could be a viable trade. However, for the reasons listed in this video previously, This trade, in my opinion, violates the spirit of the law set out to make this league fair, to make it equitable, and most importantly, right, to make it fun. Right. This is also evidenced by the public outcry that began on the afternoon of December 20th, 2017, after the trade was announced. And for that reason, and for the reasons that we talked about previously over the last 10 minutes, I must veto this trade. Thank you.